Friends, just imagine what would happen if a major mafia boss robbed the very bank where his own money was kept. It sounds strange, doesn't it? But it really happened, and it was so shocking that everyone who heard it was stunned. Now you might be thinking of a bank with security guards and alarms, but this was not an ordinary bank. It wasn't a shiny Wall Street tower. This bank was hidden inside a fur storage company on a quiet street in Providence, the capital of Rhode Island. The area was Federal Hill, where the smells of Italian restaurants hung in the air and coffee shops appeared on every corner. In the 1970s, people who looked like businessmen wearing expensive suits, driving big cars, carrying briefcases full of cash came here. But inside, things were different. Those briefcases were full of fake-looking cash, the kind of money people call black money. This was wealth that tax officers should not see. This bank was not made for ordinary people. It was a den of black money. No one came here to deposit their salaries. There were no accounts, no board of directors, no advertisements. There was no need for alarms or cameras, because the name on that vault was security enough. The Patriarca crime family. They were the biggest mafia family in New England. Their name alone created so much fear that no one dared come near them. But on a morning in August 1975, 8 people dared. They broke in and emptied more than 40 fixed safety deposit boxes. This was not just a robbery. It was an open sign that the era when the mafia was untouchable was ending. The robbery broke the mafia's greatest rule. The mafia's code said, "Don't rob your own people." So how did it happen? To answer that, we must go back to the time when it all began, to when it actually took place. The city looked calm on the outside, but it was tightly gripped by crime inside. The place, called Bonded Vault Company, was located inside the Hudson Fur Storage Building. From the outside, at 101 Cranston Street, it looked like an ordinary old building, plain walls, a small door and a window through which you could see the counter. People left their fur coats there in summer, so they would have them back in winter. A cover that could show this was an ordinary legitimate business. At least from the outside it looked that way. But behind doors marked employees only was a large room with hundreds of safety deposit boxes. Each box was big enough to hold a small suitcase or a shoebox filled with cash. There was no register. No ID was required. A key and a familiar face were enough. Neighbors all knew who came and went, but no one asked questions. The customers were not ordinary people. Bookmakers, loan sharks, truck hijackers, and gambling gangs all kept their money here. For them, this vault served as a bank. The only difference was, it was completely hidden, and that became the biggest mistake. When all the criminals in town started keeping their money in one place, that place eventually became a target for robbery. Behind all of this was one name, Raymond L.S. Patriarca. Born in 1908 to Italian immigrant parents in Massachusetts, he had by the 1950s become the real mafia king of New England. His influence spread from Rhode Island to Massachusetts and Connecticut. People called his office on Atwood Avenue in Providence simply the office. From there he ran his operations across Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. By then he was the real boss of New England's underworld. Hearing his name made people change their route to avoid him. He had everything: illegal gambling, loan sharking, truck hijacking rackets, and influence even in labor unions. Even while he was in prison, his orders were carried out. His lawyers, family, and trusted men passed messages for him. People obeyed not because they liked him, but because if they didn't, danger or death would follow. Nobody wanted Patriarca's anger turned on them. By the early 1970s, he still had power over all of New England. Hundreds worked for him, mafia men, tough guys, and his inner circle. Many businessmen were in his debt. Some politicians had won elections with his money. Even some policemen were on his payroll. If someone forgot to repay a debt, he made sure they remembered, sometimes with a phone call, sometimes with a small threat, sometimes by breaking bones, and if things escalated, by kidnapping a whole family or burning down a shop. Because of this power, the small fur storage warehouse became the world's safest criminal bank. There were no steel walls or cameras, yet no one dared look inside. But on the morning of August 14, 1975, the lock was broken. It was a Wednesday. The city was awake. People were heading to work. Traffic was moving. After about 8 a.m., Some employees of the Hudson Fur Company were opening their shop and starting their day. A man walked in, Robert the Deuce. The perfect crew, 8 people, 1 mission. Deuce was 34 years old, a clever and professional thief who had carried out many big robberies. He was skilled with firearms, and most importantly, his face and manner never aroused suspicion. He entered as if he were a regular customer, perhaps to drop off or pick up his coat. But he had .38 revolver hidden in his pocket. Within minutes he took 5 employees hostage, 2 women, 2 men who were doing repairs, and a manager who was sitting in his small office. Deuce showed his gun and said one word: "Be quiet." No one made a sound. He put white pillow covers over their heads so the staff could not see anyone's face. That would prevent them from identifying the robbers later. He said, "Don't be a hero. Do exactly as you are told. Nobody will be hurt. Even robberies have rules. No violence, no nonsense. Enter quickly. Finish the job and leave." Deuce followed these rules. Then he changed the open sign on the door to close and opened the back door. One by one the rest of his crew came in. 7 more men, each arriving at different times and by different routes, so no one would suspect. The team included Charles "Chucky" Flynn, 42, a hardened criminal who had served time; Dennis the Dan, who had escaped police capture multiple times; Gerald "Jerry" Tillinghast, 35, a hard man with mafia connections; Ralph "Ralphie" Burns, 40, an expert safecracker; Jacob "Jack" Tarjan, 37, who drove and kept lookout; and 2 brothers, John and Walter Roymet, known for teamwork. The 8 men were now inside, and what happened next shook the whole mafia system. At that moment, each of them focused on their task. The room was silent. There was no pointless talking, only slight gestures, quiet whispers and nods. They knew one small mistake could lead straight to prison. If someone's voice was recognized or someone mentioned a partner's name, the plan would fail. So they decided not to speak and to call each other only by one name: Harry. No real names, no identities. The small room, about 20 to 30 feet, had no window. Rows of steel lockers lined the walls, each with a number in a lock, and inside were hundreds of thousands of dollars or jewels. The plan was simple: drill a small hole in the lock, then manually open the locking mechanism and empty the box. But the real difficulty began. The steel would not give way. These boxes did not have simple arm locks. They were built from thick gauge steel, some with multiple layers of strong metal. As soon as the drill started, the steel heated up, drill bits began to break, the noise echoed through the room, and the burning smell of metal filled the air. Time was slipping away. It was 8:30, then 9:09, then 10. Outside, the world carried on, people going to the office, horns on the street, and the robbers feared at every moment that someone might walk in. If a customer knocked on the door or a neighbor noticed anything strange, everything would be over. They decided to change tack. They put down the drills and used brute force. They pulled out long, heavy crowbars, tools made for prying open doors and breaking locks. The room was then filled with just one sound: the clash of metal and force. When the machines failed, human strength took over. The 8 men lifted the crowbars and began attacking each box. Each strike, each blow rang through that small room. They were sweating heavily and breathing hard. The men put all their strength into the crowbars to open the boxes. Their shoulders hunched, veins strained, sweat dripping from their brows. The radio was playing in the shop across the street, and the traffic noise on the road drowned out those sounds. Every time a box opened, it sounded like the steel was giving up. That sound was a sign of victory for them. But the clock was also ticking. Time was running out. Now they worked like machines. 2 men pried boxes open, 2 emptied them, 2 stuffed the goods into bags, and 2 stood guard. 1 at the front, 1 at the back. There was no time to talk. The place now felt like a furnace. Every opened locker told a story, some of hard work, some of theft, some of death. There was hidden cash from a restaurant owner here, nights of winnings from a bookmaker there. Some boxes held thick bundles, stacks of $20 and $50 bills bound with rubber bands. Some boxes had small bills, perhaps one at gambling tables. Some held only large bills, money from a big deal. Heavy gold bars were stored in places, bars weighing 1 ounce. Some 5-ounce gold coins, American eagles, Canadian maple leafs, Krugerrands. Some boxes were filled with jewelry, gold chains, rings, bracelets, and piles of diamonds that sparkled when light hit them. Some diamonds were so large they would fit on a finger. Others were small but very valuable. Everything had a story: greed, murder, or ruin. Here and there, guns were also found in boxes. 138 revolvers, 245 automatic pistols, some with worn serial numbers, some clean. Each had been used at one time or another. Often someone would pick up an item and stop. Frozen, an old cherished thing, a gem-studded cup that might have been a family heirloom. For a moment a question would rise in the mind. What was the story behind this? Who had been robbed? Whose life was taken? But there was no time to think. This was not a place for goodness, it was a fight for money. The boxes were opened and emptied. In total, 46 boxes. They shoved whatever they found into the bags. Coins, notes, jewelry. The bags began to get heavy. 40 to 50-pound bags, and even heavier. Now it took 2 people to lift them. The mystery of how much unknown wealth was stolen began here, because no one could know the exact sum. The police said about $200,000 was taken, which they wrote in their initial report. But the underworld story put the real loss at about $3 million. Because it wasn't just cash, it was the mafia system's fortune gathered in one room, and now it had fallen into other hands. If you are thinking there must be a record saying how many dollars were stolen that day, no such record was ever found. There were no ledgers, no receipts, no bank statements. That fact tells the whole story. A bank that runs on criminals' money never keeps written account. No paper trail is left for the police or tax office to follow. So when it was over, no one really knew the true amount. All that was certain was that it was a very big theft. It is said each man received about $64,000. In 1975, that was the equivalent of 5 years' earnings for an average man. And that was only the cash portion. The value of gold and diamonds was still to be added. Now the bags they carried were not just full of money. They were full of their futures and fates. For some it was a life-changing chance. For others it meant outright ruin. They left without noise, stampede, or gunfire. No Hollywood-like car chase, no sirens, no panic. They left as quietly as they had come. They tied the employees' hands loosely enough not to stifle them, but tight enough so they could not run. They were told not to move for 30 minutes. The employees nodded in frightened silence. By 12:30 p.m., the last man was out. The whole operation had taken about 4 hours. Now the question was where to take so much money. They could not go home, because the police would go there. They could not go to an old hideout, or bar where their names or faces were known. So they all went to a safe house, a modest house in East Providence, on a quiet street, with calm neighbors and no one likely to suspect anything. Now they were no longer a team. Now everyone wanted their share. Each person's mind held different dreams. Some wanted a new life under a new name. Some wanted freedom from old debts. Some wanted to spend on women and gambling. Some wanted to work for themselves. Cash was divided. 8 men, 8 equal shares. $64,000. Everyone was happy, at least in that moment. But other things were not easy. To sell gold, diamonds, and valuable items they needed a fence. Someone who would sell the stolen goods and not ask questions. Such people don't pay full value. They pay only about 50 to. That meant the real work was still ahead, and after such work they lacked patience. Robert Deuce, who had led the robbery, had now become a slave to his own money. He had the cash in his hands and the feeling in his head, I survived. He went straight to Las Vegas, the place where money flows and reputations are buried. Vegas is for people who suddenly become rich and think luck will always be with them. Deuce went down to the casino. Blackjack, roulette, every bet he placed made him feel he was doing the right thing. When he won he felt like a king. When he lost he thought just one more chance. One more hand, one last spin, and everything would be back in his hand. He did not know luck does not always stay by your side and the mafia never forgives. Deuce began to behave as if he had won a crown. Big bets, big tips, telling his winning stories in front of everyone. He was no longer hiding. He was showing off, and that was his greatest mistake. Casino cameras were watching him. Police reports were being made. The FBI kept an eye on his every move. In the criminal world, once you are noticed, the countdown begins. One wrong phone call, one hitman, a raid, and it's over. Then there might be a quiet highway, a shallow grave in the sand, and the story ends. According to some reports, talk began of getting rid of Deuce. The other crew members were worried. If he got caught and said even a word, they would all be trapped. The crew's leader was Charles "Chucky" Flynn. By the rules of the underworld, it was his job to solve this problem. But friendship got in the way. Flynn and Deuce had worked together for years. They trusted one another. Flynn thought, let it go for now. But he did not know, showing mercy in the criminal world is the most dangerous mistake. Trust can kill. The investigation had started. In Providence, the police were now pushing hard. At first, everyone thought it was just another robbery. But within days it became clear this case was huge. Whose bonded vault was it? The police and the FBI both knew. For so many years no one had touched it because Patriarcha's reach was direct. But this time, along with the vault, secrets began to spill. One employee, though his head was covered with a thin pillowcase, had seen some faces, height, hair, body shapes, voices, and had remembered them. That little bit of information was enough for the police, and the thread began to unravel. Providence was a small city where everyone knew everyone. Every name had an identity. This crime was so big that it was the talk of every street and social club. Who was behind it? Who dared to rob Patriarch? Some rumors said someone inside Patriarcha's organization had given names to the police. To save their own skin, to settle old scores, or maybe simply to try to set things right. The police and the FBI increased the pressure. Interrogations started, names came out, and rumors began to turn into evidence. In the cold winter of January 1976, New England was buried in frozen snow. But the real cold was about to come for Robert Deuce, because fortune that lifts a man up does not take long to drop him down. In Las Vegas, Robert Deuce's luck had run out. Luck was no longer on his side. His money was running out fast, and eventually the casino security noticed him. Who is this guy throwing money around like it's nothing, they wondered. Some reports said he got involved in a small gambling dispute, while others claimed the FBI had already been tracking him. When agents checked his file and saw the name Providence, the pieces began to fit together. The FBI now knew this was the same man they had been looking for. And the FBI doesn't need to shout to get people to talk. They have other ways: fear, isolation, and showing a man what his future will look like. A small prison cell, 20 to 30 years of jail time. Then they softly ask, think about it. While you're inside, who will take care of your children? Who will your wife be with? They make him realize that loyalty doesn't save your life. Loyalty doesn't fill your stomach. And loyalty doesn't get you out of prison. At first DeSalle stayed silent. But slowly he started to talk. A little at first, then a lot. Every name, every plan, every detail. The entire story came out. Once one man talks, the rest follow. The wheel had started to turn. DeSalle began cooperating with the police. He gave statement after statement. Who did what, who was where, how the money was divided, and where everyone went wrong. As soon as word spread that he was talking, the other crew member, the dancer, was also arrested. Now the police had two men who had stood in that vault room, breaking boxes and counting money. And now those same two men were ready to testify in court. The biggest accusation came from the testimonies of DeSalle and Dennis. They exposed the names of everyone else: Charles "Chucky" Flynn, Jerry Tillinghast, Ralph Burns, the Ouimet brothers, and Jack Tarjian. But they didn't just name their partner. They made a shocking claim that completely changed the direction of the case. They said this wasn't a robbery against the mafia, it was a robbery by the mafia. According to them, the heist was ordered from the top, directly by Raymond L.S. Patriarcha himself. They claimed he planned it from inside prison. According to their story, Patriarcha was angry because his share of profits had started to shrink. The bookmakers and loan sharks under him were earning big money but cutting the real boss out of his share. The man who had always controlled everything was now sitting in prison, watching his empire slip away. So if their version was true, this robbery was nothing more than a message. A way to take back his own money and remind everyone that he was still the boss, even from behind bars. No one steals from him. And if anyone tries, the whole world will see what happens next. The theory was perfect. Too perfect. It matched Patriarcha's personality completely. A man who watched everything, who never lost control. People believed it. The media loved it. Newspaper headlines screamed, "Mafia boss robs his own bank." That one line turned the story into a legend. When a story sounds this good, people start to believe it. But remember, a story and evidence are two different things. What someone says and what can be proven are not the same. The accusations against Raymond Patriarcha remain just that. Accusations. Even after years of investigations, the police found no solid proof. People kept debating, had Patriarcha really planned the heist from his prison cell? Did he even need to? Or maybe Flynn and his crew added his name just to justify their massive crime, or to protect themselves. There were no recordings, no written orders, no direct evidence, just one story, so good that it couldn't die, and so unclear that it couldn't be proved. People discussed it everywhere, in bars, clubs, dinner tables. But only the courtroom could decide the truth. The trial became the longest, costliest, and most talked about case in Rhode Island's history. Usually, courts there handled small matters, traffic fines, minor thefts, little fights. But this case changed everything. Special prosecutors were called in. Famous lawyers were hired from Boston and New York. Thousands of pages of records, weeks of hearings, witnesses testifying for 8 hours a day. The evidence included photographs, fingerprints, broken crowbars, and even the pillowcases used in the robbery. 12 ordinary citizens sat in the jury box, trying to focus on facts and not rumor. But when an entire town already has its opinion, how easy is it to stay neutral? Witnesses took the stand. The employees who had been inside that morning, they described their fear, how their eyes were covered but they could still hear everything, how they thought they would never go home alive. One woman cried during her testimony. A man said he could only think of his family's face. Investigators showed the broken drill bits found in trash bins, phone records proving the crew had been in touch for weeks, and bank reports showing sudden large deposits by some of the accused. Then came the star witnesses, DeSalle and Dennis. They explained how the plan was made, who stood where, how the money was split. DeSalle gave a minute-by-minute account, and Dennis confirmed every detail. Sitting in a courtroom pointing fingers at old friends was not easy. These were men they had laughed and lived with, now enemies in front of a judge. DeSalle and Dennis had to do it. Flynn's eyes were filled with rage. Tillinghast kept his head down. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was loyalty on trial. The case dragged on for months, from the summer of 1976 to the winter of 19. Defense lawyers argued that both men, DeSalle and Dennis, were lying to save themselves. They had deals for shorter sentences, so they would say anything. The prosecution said the evidence was stronger than any friendship. Look at the proof, they told the jury. Look at the phone records. See how the money trail connects everything. Now it was time for a verdict. 12 jurors had to decide who to believe. Charles "Chucky" Flynn, the alleged mastermind, sat calmly. No anger, no panic. He said, "I wasn't there, I didn't do this. These men are lying." He claimed he was in another city that morning, doing other work, and even had witnesses, friends and family members. But when your witnesses are also criminals, and your story depends on their word, the jury stops listening. They notice patterns, contradictions, and slowly decide, this man is lying. After weeks of deliberation, the verdict was announced. Out of 6 men on trial, 3 were found guilty. Charles "Chucky" Flynn, the mastermind and leader. Ralph Burns, the safe-breaking technical expert. John Ouimet, crew member and enforcer. 3 others were acquitted, Gerald "Jerry" Tillinghast, and 2 others. Sentencing day brought silence to the courtroom. The judge spoke one by one. Flynn was given 15 years in federal prison, much of it in solitary confinement. The judge said, "You betrayed trust, planned this operation, and carried it out." Ralph Burns got 12 years, partly because of his technical skill and prior record. John Ouimet received 10 years. His role was smaller, but he was still part of it. Everyone filed appeals, as criminals always do. They claimed evidence was mishandled, witnesses were lying, but in the end nothing changed. Every appeal was rejected. The original verdict stood firm. Robert DeSalle and Joe Dennis, The two men who testified against their partners received only 5 years each as a reward for their cooperation, half of Flynn's sentence. But those 5 years weren't easy. When DeSalle and Dennis got out, they had to start new lives. They changed their names, moved to new cities. Some reports say they were placed in the witness protection program. New identities, new addresses, new lives. But one thing never changed: fear. The Petrarca family was still powerful. That old building at 101 Cranston Street still stands today, but now it houses small local businesses. People say the old locked room, the vault, still exists somewhere inside, hidden behind a wall or beneath a new office floor. Of all the millions stolen that morning, some of it was recovered by police, some through informants, but most of it was never found. And that's where our story ends. If you like this story, make sure to like the video, share it, and write your thoughts in the comments below. And for more real crime stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon. Thank you.